podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Collington, and with me once again, Kevin Durso. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing good. It's been a couple of weeks. We're still kind of in our summer vibes here. This is our last real kind of proper summer show. But Kevin, I don't know about you, but it's been pretty warm out here in Illinois this summer. We've had this heat dome sitting on top of us. We were over 100 for a few weeks, but this
so you
week,
sent it here for the past week.
But this week,
yeah,
it finally broke, and we got down into the 70s, and we got down into the 60s, and then last night.
For you.
Then last night, Kevin, I went to the UFC, or I went to the movie theaters to watch the UFC fights.
Yeah,
and I come out of the movie theaters. I'm wearing my Brian Dawkins jersey because it's the night before the season starts.
Sure.
And I come outside, and there's a chill in the air.
Okay. Good for,
and there's a chill in the air. Right, we're in the mid-50s.
Good for you then.
And speaking of cold weather, Morgan Frost.
Oh, so we're getting frosty is what you're trying to
We're
say.
getting frosty here because Morgan Frost will remain a Philadelphia Flyer for 2 more years. Kevin,
Not literally in Philadelphia, because this past week in Philly it was in the 90s all week. So we didn't get any of that. But there was a chill in the air the day that they decided to announce that Morgan Frost had re-signed. Sure.
And we got him. So 2 more years,
yeah.
2.1 per year. It's a $4.2 million total over the 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
What do we think? It's kind of about what we talked about, right?
This is my shocked face. Yeah,
right.
It's exactly what we talked about kind of back when the Noah Cates signing happened. It was Noah Cates, Cam York. They all kind of got this, and I forget about the money for a second with it. They all got the 2-year term. It was very, just such a congruent way of doing things. We're just going to go, keep it symmetrical and keep it right down the middle in terms of they know what their window is right now, and not a window in terms of contending, but they know what the early rebuild window is, and they kind of know take the next 2 seasons and learn more about people.
And you know what this is? This is a 2-year audition for Do You Want to Play with Matvei Michkov?
Well, it is for everybody. No,
and somebody's got to play with him.
Sure. Now, this is also in fairness, this is. It's different for every player who got a 2-year deal, if you will, because first of all, they were giving, it was 1- and 2-year deals for the free agents, which obviously is more of a placeholder for later than it is about being part of the future. But with all these other guys who got that 1- or 2-year deal that were RFAs, and you can lump in the other guys too. You can lump in Ronnie Attard and Ula Lixel to that, that you can throw them in as well, because everybody who's kind of in that realm of the RFA period, they're all getting tryout periods based. I mean, the only guy who I don't feel comfortable saying that about really is Noah Cates, who I think is kind of firmly part of the future, but he got a bridge deal because they don't want to commit. It's just a challenge right now to commit much of anything in terms of years to anybody until you know a little bit more. It's, Cates just played his rookie year. Do you want to go down that road and say, here's 5 years right now? Or do you want to give him 2 more years, see how he grows, and then say, what, 7 years, 8 years? Is that where you want to go with it? That's what you're trying to figure out. So I think that at least to start with, that's what was good about it. And that's why I figured this was what was going to happen for Morgan Frost too, because in fairness, and yes, he had a great second half of the year. He was one of their top point producers. And by the end of the year, he was one of their top 4 on the season. But he was also, I think he was the leading even strength point getter in the second half of the season.
After Kevin Hayes stopped showing up after the All-Star break?
Yeah, pretty much. But if you remember, prior to that, going into January, I want to say, or around January, February-ish, or around the All-Star break, when that always happens, right?
Yeah. He had a pretty lackluster season.
Well, he had a certain, he had a point total, whatever he was at, and he had 8 points against the Arizona Coyotes and 7 against everybody else. And then all of a sudden, second half of the year, it was, he's 28 points. It was something like 28 points in 41 games or something like that.
Right. And he ends up with, 19 goals, 27 assists, 46 points on the season. And towards that back half of the season, he was pretty close to point per game. He wasn't quite there, but he was in the ballpark for a young player.
And one of the moments that kind of stands out with him a little bit, in that second half of the year, they played a game, and I'm looking for the exact date because I remember what game it was. I was there. I saw it. They played against the Montreal Canadiens at the end of March. It was March 28th. and they won the game 3-2. And Frost scored the first goal of the game, 3:41 into the second period, that Montreal eventually tied the game up. And then with 2:15 left, he scored again in the third period. Yeah. And it was a nice counter rush up the middle. He cuts back to the middle and he lets go a shot and scores the game winner. And
showed a little bit of skill.
Well, and in that moment, though, and I know Montreal wasn't a great team last year either, obviously. They picked 2 spots ahead of the Flyers in the draft. We get it. But in that moment, that was the tail end of a 7-game homestand. There was maybe 10 games left in the season after that. And it was right smack in the middle of that period where he was being more productive. And it was one of those games where for a change, like you're looking for who stands out. And a lot of times when we were asking at the end of the year who stood out, it was Owen Tippett, or it would be, maybe it would be a Noah Cates kind of game, or we even had games where we were coming in down the stretch there that we were sitting here saying, did you see what Tyson Forrester did? Because, and he was not the youngest guy per se, but like the least experienced guy on the team at that given moment. And it is what it is. Or down the stretch when Travis Konechny came back, he was then taking over a game on occasion, but it was always the same guys. And to see Frost to do it and like find his place a little bit, it's room for hope.
It's good to see.
And I'm not trying to look, there's a reason why he's only making $2.1 million for the next 2 years as his cap hit. The reason
he's not
is
signing a big fat $8, $9, $10 million extension like some other players around the league.
Right. And that's why like for me, the peak when we talked about it, when he was pretty much already essentially the only guy left that needed a contract, when we started to talk about it, I firmly held on it's probably going to be 2 years. And my guess was it was going to be I thought it was going to be maybe a little higher than the 2.1. I kind of figured 2.5 to 3. Yeah, 2.5 to 3 was what I was thinking. But I wasn't going to go north of 3 because to me, I don't see, just because he had one really good second half of the season is not going to be enough for me to go and spend a ton of money on him. And I don't think that the Flyers should have. And obviously they didn't. And this is why it's a deal that works for both sides, because it's a deal that works because the Flyers get him on a cap-friendly deal. It's not going to break the bank. It's not going to do anything that gets in the way of your cap in any way, shape, or form. But it's the player also saying, you know what, fine, I didn't have a completely consistent year. I definitely finished strong. I didn't have the most consistent year again, and I'm ready to show that I can. So I'll take a bet on myself at that price, and I'll show that I can be part of the future, and I'll show that I can be more consistent. Just like with Cates, because when we talked about Cates getting the contract, we talked about what the next 2 years could look like and what would happen if the offense could pick up. We already know Cates is a good enough defensive forward. For goodness sake, he was garnering Selke conversation at one point, and he's a rookie, and he's not going to put up 20 goals as a rookie because he wasn't even that player in college. But like, you sit there and you start to wonder, okay, if he can at some point get there, then what kind? Like I told you what I think the sky's the limit is for him. What his ceiling could be if he starts to put up more offensive numbers. He gets the 20 goals and gets somewhere between 60 and 70 points somehow. And this is Noah Cates I'm talking about. He gets between those numbers somewhere in that range. You're looking at the Sean Couturier contract.
Absolutely.
Like, that's what you're headed towards if he continues to improve to become that good of an offensive player in addition to the defensive side. And if he doesn't, he won't be. But
sure, of course.
But with Frost, you're looking for the same kind of, like, if that's the jump I'm looking for to feel really confident in that player with Cates, then you're looking for a jump. What's the jump for Frost? Well, the first thing that the jump would be is it actually crossed the 20 goal mark this time. And he got close enough. I'm not trying to downplay 19. 19's very close, and you're right there. And because we would have said the same thing about Joel Farabee when he was stuck on 18 going into the final game of the season a few years back. We would have said the same thing. It's just now you got to cross that 20 goal mark, maybe shoot for 25, because you got to remember that was the type of player Frost was coming up. And I'm not saying he's going to be scorer. Well, I'm not going to say he's going to be the greatest goal scorer, because he wasn't even in juniors like that. He put up a lot of points through assists. But get to 25 realistically somewhere in the next 2 years. And from 46, is it safe to look at next year and say 9 more points is unrealistic? Get to 55. No, and then the year after, when it's your contract year, shoot higher. 60 to 65. Keep shooting for another 10 maybe, and see if you can't get into that actual, kind of get into that tier of truthfully being a second line level kind of player.
Well, right, and that's what I was going to say, is that you do also have to think about the fact that there are going to be opportunities on this team this year to reach out and grab it. Like, you're going to have opportunities to play big minutes, to play power play time, to probably play, maybe not Morgan Frost specifically, but lots of guys are going to see penalty kill time who might.
Well, they
not
tried him
normally.
last year, so I wouldn't be shocked.
No, I know, and maybe he does, but regardless, that's what I'm saying is he may get an opportunity, and if you can reach out and take it, you can get that number in 2 years to a point where it makes the Flyers uncomfortable. Like,
Sure.
if I told you now that in 2 years they're going to sign Morgan Frost 6 years by $7.5 million, you're probably a little uncomfortable with that right now.
Yeah, you need to see a lot before you get there.
Because he hasn't shown that that's what he can be. But he can very easily, he certainly has the potential to do that over the next 2 years and turn himself into the type of player where you go, yeah, that's the type of deal he should be signing. Or maybe even more than that. You never know. He was
or
a
not at all.
pick.
Right.
Like,
or not at all. You're right.
Absolutely.
Like it goes every direction. And I think another important caveat with that is that this year in particular is very important because after this year, the noise is going to get louder. Even though he's got one more year left, the noise is going to get louder the second that Cutter Gauthier shows up.
Yes.
The second that somebody, anybody else. It could be anybody else. I mean, let's put it this way. Elliot Desnoyers was a good goal scorer in the queue, right? No, if he shows up and he starts putting up points, or if Tyson Forrester comes in and suddenly is outscoring goal-wise, outscoring Morgan Frost, they're going to get time. Not only are they going to get time, but they're going to get the attention.
Yep.
And this is really important for Frost before some of these other highly touted prospects get in here, and before, like, going into the year, you're not competing with Cutter Gauthier yet.
Right.
You're not yet. So you're already going to fall into the kind of a window of anywhere really between top line and third line. You could be any of the any of them on any given night, depending on how John Tortorella is feeling, as we know.
Of course. You may get healthy scratched.
Well, they didn't do that with Frost as much. Honestly, they played him. It wasn't a matter of whether or not he was going to play. It was always more of, with him, just what level of consistency was he at to be able to actually get that level of playing time. There were times where they would bump him down. He wouldn't see a whole lot of playing time. And that's how John Tortorella operates. So if that's how we're going to go with that and actually factor him in, and worry about where he's going to be. Like, he controls a lot of that himself too, in terms of if he's playing well, then they'll give him every opportunity. But it's especially important right now before, because you get the sense that Cutter Gauthier, the way that his development has gone and the trajectory of his development has gone, that he's going to show. Well, first of all, if he shows up at the end of a college season and somehow is able to play this year with the Flyers, then they're going to give him minutes.
Sure.
Just for showing up right away.
Get him ice time.
Well, because you're going to do it the way you did it with Forrester. You're gonna give him a shot right off the bat and let's see how he lives up to it. And then if it's not working, then you'll start to put other guys first and work your way through. But if not, that's one thing that comes into play. If not, because there's always a chance that we've talked about this already, that Gauthier's on a really good college team. There's always the chance he's still playing after the Flyers are. Or roughly around the same time, that it's not worth it to have him come over and start playing. He may go, maybe you'd be able to put him on the Phantoms for a little, because their season might still be going at that point. You never know. But to do, not even to say to do that, it's just to get him on board in this way and to wait for him to come up. If he doesn't come up at all this year, then Frost could get some really valuable minutes throughout the course of the year. That's what's important here is, if these 2 years are going to really be make or break for Frost, and for a change, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, because I think I'll check and see if I can get more of the contract details pulled up, but he didn't sign.
I have it pulled up.
Previously, I don't think he had signed for more than a year in previous years. It was kind of a yearly thing for a while.
Frost?
Yeah.
So his ELC slid twice, and then had his 3 years, and then he signed a 1-year extension, and that was the deal that just expired.
So that was last year. Okay.
Yeah,
but that's what I'm saying.
Signed one of them.
For a change, instead of it being 1 year and this is it, you get 1 year and you're, and he had RFA
2
status.
years.
So I get it. Now you get 2. So they've committed the next 2 years to you. They've committed the next 2 years for you to really,
and he's still an RFA at the end of that, so they do still retain RFA rights on him.
Sure.
As well. That is not nothing.
Sure. And that's that's the thing, right? Like the hope is certain, like the hope to me is, and it's going to sound crazy to say, but kind of the hope is, again, it's like with Sean Couturier, what we were talking about in terms of where he would slot in. Your goal eventually is that Couturier is not at the top of the list of centermen. And I think the same is, well, the only difference with Frost that I'll say is he doesn't have to be a center.
And I did also just want to mention that I'm still nervous about Sean Couturier, just because until
and you have every right
otherwise.
To be. Well, you have every right.
Same with Cam Atkinson.
Sure.
Because I don't trust.
They're guys who missed an entire year, and you've got to factor that in. You can't just gloss over the fact that two guys on the team missed an entire season. You can't just ignore that. And in Couturier's case, close to 2.
I know.
Like, let's be real about this for a minute. Yep. Like, that's just the way that it goes. I mean, look, I'm interested in what I'm interested in more than those two is some of the other guys who maybe were dealing with something at the end or dealing with something all year for that matter, like what Joel Farabee was dealing with. Like, now I want to see what happens after you get the summer to heal and be ready and train. And even
that's one of the guys I'm excited for.
You know, even Travis Konechny to an extent, because Konechny was battling stuff throughout the course of the year. He missed some time right toward the end of the year. We almost thought he wasn't going to come back.
Right.
And then he did, and he still got to 30 goals on the year, which is good for him.
Absolutely.
You know, and then the ongoing saga that is, you know, the health of Wade Allison and Tanner Lazinski too. It's like those guys factor in too. The one thing you can say about Frost to an extent, and I say to an extent because obviously he had the 1 year that he missed the entire year also. And that was, you know, it kind of was a fluky thing because he just had one of those really bad injuries in a shortened year, no less.
Right.
That like really limited the amount of time you had to get back.
Pretty tough.
But he doesn't really miss time otherwise. Like he played last year and played the year as, you know, and it was never a question about health.
Yeah, no, he's not a guy that I'm concerned about being injury prone as of this point in his career.
Right. Like last year he played in 81 games. And I believe that the reason he missed one had nothing to do with injury. I think that was a
scratch, right?
Yeah. That, which again, that was John Tortorella doing what he does to prospects. Simple as that. So, or younger guys anyway, like, which is the tough love approach sometimes. I mean, he treated Tippett that way too at different points. Maybe not to the point of scratching, but he treated Tippett that way.
And to be fair, not even just with John Tortorella, but across the league, we have seen some success in rookies or young guys getting a chance to see the game from a different angle, to watch the game from the box, to sit with, you know, some staff and talk about what's happening on the ice and get a little bit of a different understanding for what's going on.
Sure.
And if Morgan Frost takes a seat once in a while to do that while you're bad, right? Like while the team is nowhere near the playoffs, while you're not, you know, actively attempting to accumulate points and go win the cup. Absolutely. Develop. When is the last time the Philadelphia Flyers developed anyone who turned out to be a great hockey player?
I mean,
you understand the point I'm saying,
right? You're talking
outside of the last 2 years.
Well, and you're talking.
There's been a concerted effort.
You're talking about to a level of greatness. I would say Sean Couturier.
That is fair, but they didn't even need to develop him. He just put him in the lineup and it worked.
Well, I get that, but what I'm saying is that Sean Couturier at least took a step to then get onto a level where, yes, like he won a major award
to turn into a 30-goal scorer,
right? But he won a major award. That's what I'm getting at. Like he reached a level around the league where he was the top guy at that specific role, right? For a year, even if it was just for 1 year, he was in the conversation multiple other times.
Oh,
too, by the way.
Absolutely.
So let's just factor that in. Also, I get what you're talking about. You're talking about perennial
the development status of the Philadelphia Flyers.
No, but you're talking about perennial all-star, getting up there. Which I guess in that sense, the next closest guy would be Claude Giroux, would it not?
Yep, it would be. Yeah.
Like that's probably like in terms of long-term and lasting success. Like they've had guys who have had moments.
I'll hit you with a little bit of a hot take here.
Okay.
I think the Philadelphia Flyers stunted Claude Giroux's growth for a decent portion of the younger part of his NHL career.
In terms of what?
The fact that they spent his, 24, 25, and 26 seasons just being terrible after the Cup run.
Hold on a minute. So wait, which ones? Wait, hold on.
Well, I just mean...
14, 15, 16, you mean?
No, 12, 13, 14.
Oh, 12. Well, 12, they were still really good. That was the year that was one of the years he was really up there because that was the year with Yager and things like. And
that's fair. That's fair.
I think that helped. But you know what? You know where you're making the timeline start. You're making the timeline start when he didn't have anybody else like in front of him anymore, and they made him the captain. And
they pushed him too soon.
Maybe. I mean,
a little bit too without quite enough supporting the staff. Like I love Scotty Hartnell, but he should not have been playing the top line. I don't want to gloss over some of the other success stories, if you will. I know what you're talking about. You're talking about in terms of and I think the key, especially when you're talking about it in the context of Morgan Frost, is Frost was a first round pick. So who's the last first round pick that didn't come out and be like, oh, this guy's going to be at best a second liner. You're looking for the guy who falls at like you want the Cutter Gauthier, you want the Matvei Michkov. That's what you're looking for, and they've gotten a couple of those now. But for years they didn't. And that's the point I was making.
Here's the because here's the exact point. Okay, is Scott Lawton a success story?
Yes and no.
By NHL standards, he is a success story because he's got a long career. He's played many games. He's
been a supremely valuable player every step of the way. And I do not mean to diminish that for a single
And in fairness, it's a developmental success to a degree because you developed him into a role that he does suit very well and he plays well. But it's not the role that you're talking about.
Exactly.
He's
not a superstar.
Because the next closest name that I kind of come up with that I feel a little and there's an element. And this kind of ties into another topic we're going to briefly touch on because I don't want to talk too much about it. But there's an element of this particular player I want to mention, his development, that they don't have control over, but it still helps in the long run. For a little while, Oscar Lindblom was looking like that player. For a little while. And obviously we know the reason why it probably will never come to complete fruition. And it's a shame. Because that's the ultimate out of your control circumstance.
It's a big old what if,
and it's the ultimate out of your control circumstance.
I'm so bummed.
About
that.
but still, for a while, you looked and you're like,
he's the guy.
But you're looking like this is the guy, the international guy, no less. This is the guy who shows up out of nowhere for a bunch of teams that the Flyers play against, throughout the course of a season.
Yep.
And that shows up and all of a sudden because he played over here, he's great, because he played at a pro level for plenty of years beforehand. So he comes over and even though he's a rookie,
he came over with just a boatload of experience.
Yeah, so even though he's 23 or 24, even though he's a rookie, he's not really it was a little bit like Artemi Panarin a little bit.
It was closer to the KHL rookies. Yeah.
Right. It was close. I mean, and you're playing in one of the top European leagues. You're playing in the Swedish league, like
the competition level isn't quite the same, but it's
it's up there.
80% of the way there, 90% of the way there.
It's still up there for European hockey standards.
And there are former NHLers floating around all of those leagues.
So but I get your point. I get your point, especially when it comes to and I think that the other key with one of the other keys with Frost is his development and the idea of growing him into more than just being a role player and maybe being a significant piece of this is also part of a timeline at this point, especially around forwards, where you have a bunch of non-success stories, because he's the first round pick that's sandwiched between Nolan Patrick and Yerman Rubtsov. We all know how those two turned out. So you start to look at Frost and kind of think the same way, even if he's been better than both of them, because of the fact that it's just, it's not the high level. And there was a lot of excitement because of what he was able to do.
He was flashy. Right.
And people watched his junior year, especially his draft plus 1 year. And oh boy, did you see what he did in his draft plus 1 year? Those numbers were phenomenal.
And he was another guy that was perceived to have slipped a little bit. Most draft projections didn't have him falling to the Flyers at 27 or trading up to 27. And it's one of those things where the guy's a first round pick. The expectations are high. He hasn't quite lived up to maybe not that yet.
Right.
But if you think about it, we are also talking about the end of the first round, right? And that does soften your expectations a little bit, right? It's not Nolan Patrick where he goes 2 overall.
It's back to the Scott Lawton conversation again.
Exactly.
Scott Lawton went in that range, and you're like, you're not shooting too high.
I would call Scott Lawton a moderate success.
Sure.
So far, Morgan Frost is projecting towards about the same.
Sure. Oh, it's because it takes a lot to get to that level. Like you got to do, you got some stuff to do before you get to that level.
Certainly takes a lot to elevate beyond that level if that is your goal, right? If you'd like to become a 40-goal scorer, if you'd like to be one of the top 25 highest paid players in the NHL, one of these. If you want to be a superstar in the NHL, you're going to have to go out there and prove it. You're going to have to take these opportunities. You're going to have to do all the off-season work. And like you said, Morgan Frost played 81 games this year. As far as I'm concerned, the injury is behind him. He looked better in the second half of the year, which after a guy misses most of a year, I'm not surprised that it took him 30 or 40 games to kind of get his legs under him a little bit. Right. At his age, right? He's still catching up to the NHL speed.
It's a lot of things because that wasn't just the year, like that had been 2 years post the injury at this point because he played 55 the year before. But you get the point with how that year went too, because that year was just all over the place too. It was a mess, and so like it's challenging for a player sometimes to really stay level-headed within the whole process. And again, one of the other things about this, especially as we start to approach a new season, is that we talked about this going into last season, that there was just something that I don't want to say it didn't feel right, but like the energy levels were all off the charts in the negative direction. There was no buzz. There was no hype around anything. And for good reason.
Yep.
But there's an element of that does rub off on the room to an extent. Like, you're not going to tell me that that it's impossible for these guys to not find out the way that people feel about something. Like,
right. Well, and
it's everywhere. So,
and I think there will be, at least in terms of the locker room attitude this year, I think there was definitely some addition by subtraction in the off season. Mm-hmm. And we all know who I'm talking about. There's a center in St. Louis and a defenseman in Carolina. And
they're the two most obvious, and a defenseman in Columbus now.
Yeah, but to a lesser extent. But to a lesser extent, I think.
Yes. Yeah.
Just in terms of vocalism.
Sure, but still to an extent nonetheless.
Of course. Of course. He's a veteran leader. He was a top pair defenseman.
Well, and you're using the other two, by the way, because of again, vocal presence, all that type of stuff, and all of that. It still doesn't change the fact that, because what did everybody know about Ivan Provorov too? The guy doesn't miss a game,
man.
So now you take that's a presence that's leaving the room also, and that's going to have an impact in a variety of ways, because there's it is what it is. Like,
and there is a bit of a possibility. Without the Claude Giroux anymore, and even the Wayne Simmons going back a little further,
sure,
there is a possibility that there's a little bit of a loudmouth vacuum, right? There may not be a guy who is the big, loud, boisterous one in the locker room, and if that is the case, there's a chance that the personality of John Tortorella takes over. And I know that's something that kind of scares everybody, because you like John Tortorella, you're okay with him leading your team. You don't want him to be your team necessarily. So I do worry a little tiny bit about that. Because even the guys coming back, right? Like Sean Couturier, we never really heard that he was the most vocal guy. Same, Cam Atkinson maybe a little more so, but generally pretty quiet and reserved. And you're around the team a little more than I am. Are there any huge personalities that I'm missing out on here? Travis Konechny?
I would say I just have the forwards up first. I'm scrolling through, obviously.
Travis Konechny, Joel Farabee.
Joel Farabee's a good chirper, don't get me wrong, but he, what I'm talking about, when you're in the room after the fact,
I feel like he's 1 30-goal season away from just having the most confidence on planet Earth.
I mean, he could be. I don't know. I mean, does
that make sense?
Yeah, it does a little bit. I mean, I also find him to be.
He's got a little bit of that Boston twinkle in his eye, where he's ready to just fire at anybody who gives him a hard time.
as much as he was there for college for a little, that's not in his blood. He's from upstate New York.
You know what I mean.
I know.
You know what I mean.
He's one of these guys who does actually fall into the category like, and obviously there's a handful of new guys that I have not been around as much, by the way, that I have to, or at all for that matter. Like, how much can you learn from a Zoom call?
Of course, right.
You know, seriously. That I'll find out more about later. Like I can't give you a read on Garnet Hathaway yet. He might be one of the more vocal guys. He might not be. I can't give you a read yet. I can't. Well, but I'm looking at the rest of the guys that kind of go away from that, and like I'm sitting here looking, I'm going, Owen Tippett is like the most soft-spoken person I think I've ever seen.
Scott Lawton.
Lawton's.
I feel like he's intense, but he's not.
Yeah, because he's got an intimidating.
He's not the guy that. Right, he's not the guy that makes everybody laugh. Although, listen, I'm going to tell a Scott Lawton story. Okay. And I might have told it on the show before.
Just tell it again, because it's probably been a minute.
So, the greatest event on the Philadelphia Flyers calendar, and we all know this, is the Flyers Wives Fight for Lives Carnival.
Sure.
Great cause. Donate. Go. Support
just came back last year after a bit of a pause, by the way, because they stopped it for a while over COVID. So
great. It's a phenomenal organization, and we love the carnival. I was there a couple of years ago with my girlfriend at the time, now wife, and we did the games because we figured out that the games are the best value because you get to play a game with them and like chit chat a little bit, and most of them will still take a picture or sign something. So it's a good value.
That's fair.
So we played a game, and we waited in line to play a game, and there was a kid in front of us, probably 7 or 8. And they get up, they play the game, and it's Scott Lawton playing the game with them, and I don't even remember what it was. It was Big Washers or something like that.
Okay.
And whatever. And Scott, the kid goes, "Oh, Scott, will you sign my hat?" And he takes his hat off and hands it to him with the marker. And Scott Lawton looks at it, points at it, and goes, "I already signed it." The kid had handed him a hat that he had already signed and asked him to sign it again.
Oh my goodness.
And the kid turned beet red and went, "Okay." And Scott goes, "Do you want me to sign it again?" He's like, "No, it's okay." And he grabs it and runs away. And Scott he felt terrible. And he felt awful, and I'm sure he doesn't even remember it. But I was standing right behind this kid, and my wife and I still laugh about it to this day.
I can tell you I have never heard that story before, so I don't think you've told that on the show before.
Well, that is great.
That is really funny. That is really funny. I thought you were going to tell me that you got up there and played a game and he said something funny to you or something like that, or just had this look or I thought the way that story started to line up was he's playing a 7-year-old kid and it's just fun and whatever. But then if you get up there, then all of a sudden
he goes hard.
Yeah, right. Then he goes hard and he's super competitive and he's got this look on his face like, I'm going to beat you. You know?
No, they were all pretty chill about
I know.
it. Like they were all really,
and I know how
really
the carnival
great.
functions, so I know that they're pretty chill with that type of stuff. But so anyway, so I'm saying Tippett's pretty soft-spoken. Frost is pretty soft-spoken. I think in interviews anyway, I think Faraby's pretty soft-spoken, all things considered. I mean, even Konechny is to an extent. Konechny can get, I'm trying to think of the right word.
Rowdy.
No, not rowdy.
Rambunctious?
No, because I'm trying to think of it in terms of from an interview perspective, because he's not doing anything bad. Like it's not like he's giving off a bad persona or anything like that, but he'll answer questions to an extent where it's really hard to explain, kind of like this way of like knowing, almost a way of knowing I can I can provide a better answer to the question, like and word it in such a way where it doesn't I'm not go like it's got a little bit of cockiness to it, but it's not going to come across that way. Like he has
he's trolling a little bit,
but he's just got a great way of towing the line where it's like he doesn't go over in terms of sounding like that level of player where it's a smart ass answer all the time. But you can tell there's you can tell that the competitive fire is still burning as he gives the answer. Because that I don't even want to sit I didn't even want to say it in any other way than that. Like it's just he's still feeling the competitiveness of the game, yet he's towing the line to give you still a good quality answer that isn't insulting your question, and it at the same time is not, oh boy. I just saw the text message come through, so I'm laughing.
Listen, I'm just thinking about that carnival. I do have one other quick story from that carnival when you're done your point here.
But you get the point with connecting. Like, even he doesn't come, like, he has a way of not coming across like as the loudmouth guy in the locker room, like that rowdy guy. Yet the competitive fire is still there, so he kind of could be like
he's
like
passionate.
Again, but I just did that with, like, think about this. I just did this exercise with Konechny's like that, Faraby's like that. Lawton, when speaking, now this is to the media too, so maybe it's a completely different story. I don't want to judge. Certainly, speaking to the media is not the same as speaking to your teammates. But Lawton doesn't speak that way typically either. Noah Cates, definitely not. Like, Noah Cates is not that kind of guy. Frost is not.
It's a bit of a sheepish team, personality-wise.
Yeah, do you know the first name that pops out that I say, oh, yeah, that's a guy who might be that way?
Nick Delorier?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you know what it is, too? Honestly, it's the personality of guys who are willing to kind of stand their ground on the ice too. You feel it when you're standing right next to them, even when you're just asking questions, and they're totally cool, but you still feel the intimidating factor that they possess.
And the thing about Nick Delorier is he feels like the kind of guy who will grab the aux cord in the locker room.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And that's a good thing.
Before we go on to the thing, by the way, I just went to the defenseman list, and I think I found your guy.
Okay.
Risto.
Fair.
Risto, if you've, I don't know how often you get to hear some of the clips after games.
Oh,
or whatever,
yeah.
But okay, what did I just say about Travis Konechny? You want to talk about smart ass answers sometimes in a completely comedic way. Like, Risto's got some really good comedic timing with his answers sometimes.
He's witty.
He's one of the. It's funny because it's a very dry comedy. Like, it's not meant to, like, he does it like as if he's not trying to do it or that he doesn't know in a way, but he knows completely. Like, we know he knows. But at the same time, it's one of those things where it's like, he doesn't seem like again, he doesn't seem like this rowdy guy or this big rah-rah guy, but he does seem like the type of guy who can say something and get your attention quickly.
That's fair.
And he also carries that intimidation factor. He's one of the taller guys on the team.
Can lay some hits.
Dude's pretty muscular, obviously. I'm sure you know that without having to be up close to him.
Correct.
I have, obviously, and yes, he does carry that intimidation factor, no question. I mean, look, the reason why Delorier carries that intimidation factor is not just because he fights people, obviously, on the ice, but like, you ever like this, and this is going years back to when I first started covering the team. And to be fair, by the way, as we come up on the start of this thing, this is going to be year 10 for me, so I've got a lot of memories,
feelings about that.
Well, no, but memories and things I remember, kind of that, like, things that you remember when, like, it's in year 1 of doing this or year 2 of this, and you're kind of getting that first taste of this that you're awestruck by. Like, I forget who it was.
How many seasons have you had, like, full, like, gone to every game?
Probably since 1920. Really,
okay.
Realistically, that I could.
Well, and by that I mean you're welcomed at every game. Like, you're on the list for every game. Well, I don't mean actually physically attended every game. Like, were you full-time pretty right away 10 years ago?
All right, the outlet was game, but like, we got game by game credentials, and that was probably only because, in the same vein as everything else, it would be depending on how many people would go down and help out the outlet.
Right.
Like, that I learned pretty quickly, and this is one of the things I pursued with it after a while, was that if I could commit more time to it and be down there almost every single game, then it would probably lead to more. Like, we didn't have complete access when it's 3 people showing up and splitting it 15 each, or, you know what I mean? Like, roughly, right? Like 15 home games each. It's not going to do the same thing for you. That being said, like, yeah, so it's really, like, in terms of complete total everything, this will be season number 4 out of those. And cool. that also picked up when I started doing everything for 97.3 also. So, like, when that'll be 7 years. So it, like,
that helps.
Yeah. So it kind of continued along.
There was
that
a
way
couple
too.
Little steps along the way.
Sure. And that works. It works its course, and you figure it out. But I remember going into the room this was probably after a preseason game, believe it or not. So, like, you're kind of getting a few players, like, you're interviewing players who are not at the forefront of the team, especially
it's a bit of a weird environment.
Well, and consider, especially in a year when the team was still, like, on again, off again, make the playoffs kind of stuff. So they were trying to still be competitive, right? I believe it was Chris Stewart who
Okay.
was doing the interview afterwards, and he gotten in a fight like during the game or whatever. I just remember seeing his knuckles after a game or whatever, and he still got like two really big cuts on like right over the his first, like his index finger and his middle finger, like right over on his left hand, and like you're just looking and you're like, damn,
Sheesh.
like
that looks like it hurts.
Well, not even that. It's just the life of being kind of being the tough guy on the team. You know, like.
But and he might have to drop him next game too.
Right. But you can imagine like Delorier's like that. Every now and then somebody else might be. I mean, and I like the only reason that it even stood out to me is because like I just happened to be in that particular media scrum, standing on on the side where his left hand was. I could see the top of it. He just had his hands to his side. I could see his knuckle there. I was just whatever. And
another guy who was kind of like that when he was here, and this gets me back to my carnival story, was Radko Gudas.
Oh, and he was a personality. He was a great personality.
Well, of course. So we're at this carnival, and one of the activities that we attempted to go for was playing giant pong with Radko Gudas. And they line up trash cans, and they put them in the pong shape, and then it's played with like a dodgeball or a soccer ball or whatever it is. And we get there, and they come over and tell us he's a little late. And we go, okay, like, no problem. We're third or fourth in line. Like, if he shows up at any point, we're gonna get to play with him. Like, we're right there.
Sure.
So we're waiting. They're 50-minute slots. Mm-hmm. 25, 30 minutes go by. We start to get pretty nervous. Mm-hmm. They come over and they tell us that he's not coming.
Okay.
And we go, okay. We circle around. We start trying to find something else to do, blah, blah, blah. We get in line for something else. I can't remember what it was. I believe it was a Sam Moran signing.
Okay.
Because I love me some Sam Moran.
That's speaking of what's coming up later this week, by the way, that's developmental coach Sam Moran to you now.
He told me in that meet and greet that nobody was willing to fight him at the NHL level, and that he had tried, because I asked him why he hadn't fought yet. Anyway,
because people saw his AHL fight highlights.
Right. As we're in line for Sam Moran, I open Twitter.
Yes.
First thing I see when I open Twitter, Radko Gudas has been suspended for I think it was 5 or 6 games.
Oh my goodness!
It was the chop on the head.
Oh really? Okay.
Yep. Yeah. You know exactly the one I'm talking about.
Yep.
And he had a hearing for it, and
so he didn't
missed
make
that gap because he was on the phone with the Department of Player Safety.
They couldn't put, they seriously couldn't push that until the carnival was over.
Apparently not.
Come on.
Listen, when the league wants to do their business,
I got you.
Their business.
That's it. That's really interesting. So
that was an eventful carnival for me.
By the way, I'm laughing at the picture. By the way, you sent over a little while ago. But for context, by the way, it's a picture of
from that same carnival.
You're with Scott Lawton and Travis Sanheim there, and I know you're tall. I get that. But like you're above Travis Sanheim in this picture.
Correct.
Okay.
I leaned to the side a little bit so that he didn't feel bad.
Now, I just want to, for context's sake here for a second, because Travis Sanheim is 6'3".
Yep.
So, okay. Now, back when I was able to go and do this experience as a fan myself, obviously, which kind of listen, when I wasn't doing full-time games, then yeah, sure, we were all still kind of powwowing around down there too, and whatever. So this was probably, it might have been my first year covering, honestly. It might have been like 14, honestly. I had gone and took a picture with Kimmo Timonen. So now there's nothing wrong. Like obviously Kimmo Timonen's a great player to get a picture with, nice guy, all stuff like that. Kimmo Timonen is roughly, without skates, by the way, roughly my height. Maybe I'm being generous for myself, I guess, if I say that, because like, for God's sakes, I need to stand next to Danny Briere to feel good about myself. If I stand next to Danny Briere, I feel very good about myself. And then I remember the part where he ended up having a very long NHL career, and I obviously don't.
Yeah, we've met a handful
I sit in the press box.
We've met a handful of times. You're not the tallest fella, Kev.
I didn't say I was. Listen, I knew long enough ago that I was never going to be. So. Let's just be real about it here. Okay, listen, it was funny because I remember, I forget when, because I've posted this a couple of times. It's on like my social media. It's on my Facebook, I think, somewhere. I may have put it on Twitter at one point in time. Down the road. Oh, here we go. We got more pictures coming in. This is
different carnival.
Yeah, let me see here. Dude, you're even towering
for a height comparison.
No, yeah, but you're even right there. You're eye level with Sam Moran. That's pretty damn good, you know.
And towering over Michael Raffle.
Yeah, really, no kidding.
Absolutely towering.
So
I also have a picture from that carnival with Stanley Cup champion Nicholas Obey-Kubel.
Now he's a shorter guy, so I'll take that one at least.
And in that same picture is my wife and Stanley Cup runner-up Alex Lyon.
Okay. Lyon's shorter for a goalie too, by the way. Lyon's probably only about maybe 6 foot. So.
Yeah, Nicholas Obey-Kubel is about 5'10", so I tower.
I know, that's why I said he's closer to my height. He's another one who you take the skates off of him. I feel pretty good about myself. I definitely, and I got to be close enough in the locker room. Now, one of the funny stories
I will admit, I got a little bit of stink eye from pretty much every guy I was way taller than. They all kind of give me a little bit of side eye, but
what one of the funny things I have is, so I have a picture from years ago. So this is, I think I've told this story before. I told this on the station specifically at one point in time when I did a spot that I had done back in the year. I think I mentioned this on here before, in the year of the lockout, the full season lockout. So 04-05. At the time, Ken Hitchcock was coaching the Flyers at the time, and he did a clinic at the skate zone that was near me. So I did the clinic because I was still kind of like, I was in between doing a bunch of stuff to try to even remotely be an athlete. Like I was not very skilled, obviously, but I would go back and forth. Like I'd played foot hockey growing up a little bit, then transitioned to roller hockey, and then tried ice hockey for like in a league setting for like a year, and did baseball in between and things like that. Like I tried a couple of things, but I was never great at any of them. Obviously, that's why I sit in the box and write.
Well, of course.
But I did this clinic.
Those who can't write about it.
Sure. But it's like that those that can't do teach, and those that can't teach gym, right?
Yeah.
If you know what movie I'm talking about.
Those who can't write about it, watch.
Yes.
Host this podcast.
Yeah. If you know what movie I got that line from, by the way, and I know you probably do, but
man.
Oh, you don't even know? Oh wow. Okay. I thought I was pulling one that you absolutely knew.
I absolutely know it, and it's absolutely escaping me. Help me out.
Hold on, I'm giving people a few more seconds because I know that I hope the listeners are deciding.
Just yelling.
Yes, I hope they
Leave it in the comments. Subscribe to our YouTube. Leave it in the comments.
Okay, I'll give you the answer now. School of Rock.
Okay.
Yes. So,
yep.
Anyway.
For some reason, I couldn't get past dodgeball, and I knew it wasn't dodgeball.
Yeah.
But I just had the mental block. Okay.
Dodgeball was if you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a ball.
Right. Oh, there's more quotes than just
there's
that.
Way more.
You got to rewatch it, baby. Come on.
No. There's more than that. There's a lot more that I also can't say on our show.
You know, that's fair.
Anyway, so I have a picture from after the clinic was over. Like it was one of the last things. So, and it's a really cool moment because, by the way, Ken Hitchcock, a recent inductee, you're going to be an inductee into the Hockey Hall of Fame coming up. So. Yep. That's relevant to this also because it's a pretty cool story. Actually, what I should do is I gotta dig the picture out of wherever I have it in the house and put it in a picture frame in my office because that's kind of a cool thing. But I take the picture and this has nothing to do with, obviously I'm like 12, so I'm not super tall by any stretch. But I sit there and I'm like the palest kid possible. Like I'm super pale and and super short and right-handed shot. And I'm sitting here and I went for it and I went, obviously the scouting report said future Danny Briere right here, like young Danny Briere, right? Because I had no height. I had no height. I had the same.
Did you have any of the speed, the skill, or the talent? Any of that?
I mean,
okay. I didn't want to assume that you didn't, but if you did, you probably wouldn't.
The only thing that I will say is that when I remember this is kind of a funny story too, and this just tells you how much of a summer show this is that we're even telling.
This is the summer show 2023. Here it is.
Yeah. 2K23.
Yes.
Do that one. So I don't go skating frequently. I would like to go more often. It's not exactly a thing that my wife is a big fan of because okay, here I can give you the easiest reason why. My wife's not a big fan of it because if I say let's go skating, my wife's expectation of skating is so you're going to skate with me, right? Which consists of going about as fast as you go in a school zone. And then what ends up happening inevitably is because I'm on skates, I'm on the ice, and I do know how to skate, like decently for a guy who doesn't actually play a sport, right?
For
So I sit
me,
there and I sit there and I always hit a moment where I sit there and I say, I just want to like give me 2 laps.
I'm just gonna hit a couple laps real
I
quick.
just want 2 laps, and I want to like go into the like, and it's legit laps. Like you're skating it like you're doing fastest skater. But I want 2 laps where I go into the corners and go past the goal line, and then turn on the edges.
You're tucking a little bit.
Sure, turn on the edges, kind of glide through it, and then come back out and actually pump my feet a little bit and pick up some speed. I can get up to it like whatever. So, but in years prior, like I hadn't skated in a long time between, like I don't think I ever did over high school-ish or anything. Like I really didn't go frequently. And when I was in college, it was like my sophomore year of college, I want to say, I was friends with a bunch of people who apparently did this on a regular or somewhat regular basis, I'll say. Like they went skating or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll go or whatever. And I don't even know if I had my own pair of skates anymore at that point, because I'd probably outgrown them from the last time I even had gone.
Right.
So, but I wasn't about to rent. My shoe size was roughly my dad's size. I'm like, let me just use your skates,
Sure.
which is fine. I go out there, and all of a sudden, like all my friends who had never seen me skate were like, "Oh wait, you can actually do this."
You like know how to skate.
And I turned around. Like the thing was, like I hadn't stepped on the on ice in a long time.
Right.
And you're like wobbly for like the first lap or lap and a half, going slower, and then it's like riding a bike. You know, like it's just the way that it is. But it was always a funny thing. Although of course they now, granted, you're going to like a public skating session, so there's no sticks or anything like that. So of course you're just skating like as if like you're skating like, I guess, an official, if you want to call it, like look at a hockey reference. But I got a ton of figure skating references thrown at me that night instead.
Would you like to hear what the skating experience is for me?
Oh, I can't wait for this.
Whether on wheels or blades, it is about 15 minutes of me hugging the wall, falling 11 times, completing 1 lap, and then sitting on a bench. That is my skating experience. I get out there, I wobble my way around the wall 1 time so I can say I skated a lap, I went skating, I did the thing, and then I go sit on a bench and eat a pizza.
Yeah, we used to do a bunch of that type of stuff. We used to go, and we did it a bunch of different ways too. We used to go, like we would go to, and maybe, pick a, like if we could find an indoor rink somewhere we could go to, we would do that. I think one year it was like December or January or something like that. We went to the river rink because it was
nice, something
fun to do. It was always a great time. Like we genuinely had to see. The funny part is, so you're telling me that's your skating experience. We did have a friend in the group whose skating experience was exactly the same, and
solidarity.
So there you go.
Okay. This is a summer show. Okay.
Yeah. Now, do we have anything else that we really? I mean, we talked about Morgan Frost for a good solid stretch here. I guess we should mention.
We don't have to spend
Michkov
a ton
a little bit.
I was gonna say we don't have to spend a ton of time on it, but Matvei Michkov has been a healthy scratch in 3 of the first 4 KHL games, and the game he did play, he received what it was about 7 or 8 minutes of ice time.
It was literally about, I think, 6 minutes 51 seconds or something. Like that.
No shots on goal, nothing really significant happening. I kind of alluded to this on our last show. Fedotov, I believe, has continued to play games, so just in open defiance of the IIHF. It's Russia. Man, like that's kind of the end of the story. Is they're gonna do whatever they want, and right now they have decided that Matvei Michkov is a bad person for wanting to be drafted into the NHL and serve out his contract. But whatever.
Yes and no. Yes and no.
Okay.
Because the other key to this, and I've listened to a bunch of different people kind of describe this or whatever, and I'm trying to I wish I could remember exactly where I heard this comparison, but it was. I think it might have been on Snow the goalie. I don't remember completely, but I heard this somewhere, and it had honestly been my thought the day before I heard this comparison. So I had it in my head. Picture, if you will, and this happens on occasion in professional sports in general. Picture, if you will, that your head coach is not a guy who actually has really played before. Okay, and that happens on occasion. We've seen crazy enough things where all of a sudden the guy who is the general manager or the president of hockey operations or something decides, you know what, I'm firing everybody and I'm going to just do the job for the rest of the year because I can do it better right now, right?
Right.
Like I know all. The general manager of the team is the head coach of the team that Michkov's on. Roman Rottenberg is the guy's name. And I'm not going to spend a ton of time on, I'm sure other places have explained this already. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this, but like that name is very high up in Russian ranks. Let's just say it that way. And
he has powerful connections.
They have very powerful connections. But bottom line is, and I've seen this from other outlets that freely say it, he's not a coach by traditional standards, and therefore doesn't completely.
He's a political figure.
Well, but it's not only that; he's not going to necessarily make decisions that are being done for the good of the team in terms of the most talent.
Well,
he's doing things. He's doing things that make a statement of asserting his own power.
And he's certainly not doing what's best for the player. In every case.
Like I do.
He's certainly not acting with that as his main motivation.
Right now, let's just for one moment here, because we've talked about the team that Fedotov's on before, because I just saw, believe it or not, I just saw this yesterday because he made a start yesterday. Fedotov made a start yesterday, continuing in defiance
just
of the whole
open
ruling.
Defiance,
but whatever. Like we're not going to spend tons of time on that. We had talked about previously, because the head coach of the CSKA Moscow team that Fedotov's on is Sergei Fedorov. Now, obviously, he's got a hockey background, so we don't have to question his ability to play the right guys per se. But but we have talked about something in his strategy before that is a very unique and interesting way to conduct a game, right? Do you know where I'm going with this?
He's the one who pulls the goalie in overtime, right?
And he did yesterday, and they lost. So there you go. I knew I wanted to throw that out there because I saw it the other day. Because isn't there a penalty? Isn't there a penalty for that?
Good.
Isn't there a penalty for that? By the way, don't you lose?
You don't get the overtime point.
Right. That's what I thought it was. Yeah.
At least in the NHL, I'm not sure if that is the case with their rules.
Right, but okay, but that was the thing.
Say,
right?
You do have to.
No, but that was because it was a question as to why don't teams ever do that or whatever.
The answer is
if you lost, you would lose the point.
Net.
Yes,
right.
Because it's an empty net goal. But it just made me laugh that kind of came up or whatever. But here's the biggest problem with the Michkov stuff right now. Okay, first of all, the situation between Fedotov and Michkov is not directly connected. The only connection is they're playing in the KHL, and they're both Russian.
Flyers. Well, they're both Flyers, right?
Right. You know what though? You're right. Obviously, on paper, you're right. I don't even know if I would move forward considering Fedotov a Flyer the way this is going.
No, that's fair. But I did want to say, I want to be careful with how I phrase this.
Sure.
I don't think it's entirely irrelevant that the Philadelphia Flyers are the organization at issue here. Russia holds grudges, man.
Okay.
I don't think it's
irrelevant
from a political standpoint. No, correct.
I was trying to make sure because I was trying to make sure I heard the double negative.
I think it is relevant that the Philadelphia Flyers are the team at issue. And I'm not saying it's a main factor, but I think if they're gonna play games, I don't think it's a coincidence that they're currently playing games with two major Flyers prospects, or not playing games in the case of Michkov.
And my response to that is, you're not alone. That's my response.
Right, and is it the main factor? The fact that Ed Snyder told a bunch of Soviets to go take a hike? No, it's not. But is it back there in the Soviet consciousness somewhere? Maybe a little.
Sure. It's look. I'm sure that, and that's why that's an easy place to go with this because sure, there's an obvious connection in the franchise's history to that country in general. So yes, I get that.
Maybe the greatest hockey game of all time. Anyway,
the point I wanted to make about Michkov specifically because it was just like with the highlight reels from preseason games. They're exactly that. They're preseason games.
Sure.
Let's not go crazy over a handful of preseason games and some highlights that make him look good. I get it. It was early August at the time. There's not a lot going on, early to mid August, so there's not a lot going on. You're really grasping for something to get, like something to watch, something to talk about, and it's easy. It's low hanging fruit at that point to see, oh, look, the guy who they just drafted 7th overall, who many people thought was top 3 talent. Look at him scoring a goal in a preseason game in the KHL. That's great, right? Like, it is the low hanging fruit, and they've definitely got you there. Like, they know that people know that if there's a highlight to be put out there, they're going to do it because Flyers fans are going crazy over this. Totally valid. The same thing, like, again, pump the brakes with the scratches too for a second here, because inevitably there's going to come a time where a decision has to be made, because they can loan him to another KHL team if they want to, or they can realize that he's talented enough to be on the team anyway.
And just
because listen, you're also testing his to a degree. You're testing his demeanor, his character, everything by putting him. He's on a team.
That's a very Russian thing to do.
Oh, no. And better yet, it's not just that it's a Russian thing to do. He's on a team with somebody who's, again, is not a traditional coach. This is a guy who's a coach who's got
He's
no
essentially
hockey
a political figure. Right.
So if nothing else, this is a few weeks going on here of trying to assert your power and see how he handles it. And if he handles it with grace and the way that you hope that he does, then maybe you start playing him because you saw how he could handle it. Or maybe you don't, and then we have a problem on our hands, and then you have a reason to be more concerned. But in the early going, this is the way that they do things. By the way, it's not a developmental league. If you're playing in the KHL, you're playing to win.
You're a men's league or a professional.
You're
league.
A professional league playing to win. Now, at some point in time, again, you do have to realize he's better than most of the players on your active roster to begin with, and he should be playing. But for now, that's not the way that they're going to approach it. And the biggest problem I have with so much of what I've seen is, and I know that it's in the doldrums of the summer, entering, and we're entering a really
we're getting there, yeah.
But we're entering, especially the beginning days when all this was happening, because he was scratched the first 2 games, then played, then was scratched again, right? Yeah. So when the first 2 games he's getting scratched, it's beginning of September. It was like Labor Day weekend, right? Like, I know you're looking for something, and I know that it's in the middle of kind of the calm before the storm, if you will, of baseball playoffs, and the NFL season was not underway completely yet. So you're waiting for that too. And and especially if you're just strictly a Flyers fan and you're looking for that to get excited about, I get it. But the idea that we're going to do this day-to-day Michkov watch,
it's not going to happen.
Is really, it's just going to drive people insane.
Right.
It's really going to be complete insanity to do that. And I especially look at it over Labor Day weekend in particular, and really just think, there's got to be something, get a hobby or get something better to do.
Right. He signed there for the rest of the season. He signed there for the rest of the season and 2 more. Right. And is there a chance he buys himself out? Blah, blah, blah. Sure. Whatever. Yeah,
but why do you think that I talked about? Why do you think I never went there? Yep. I never went there with is anything possible? Of course anything's possible, because, who the hell knows? But
I think it's pretty likely that he buys himself out that last year.
I don't know about that. I mean, he has to do it himself, and maybe he does. I don't know. But I think
I have a feeling he will.
I think that I think they're going to do everything in their power to keep him for all 3, though.
I think so too. He might have to run, but it's worked for guys before.
But I hear you.
You mentioned Sergei Fedorov. Hello.
There's just so much there's so much grasping for anything right now, and it goes beyond Michkov, by the way. It goes beyond Michkov. Let's just wait. There's still people who are tracking the Fedotov thing on a day-to-day basis. You really can stop. I think it's clear, by now. If you don't get the picture by now, you're never going to get the picture of what
the IIHF isn't sending armed guards in there to get Ivan Fedotov out. He's there, man. Unless he sneaks away or they just decide to send him away,
right?
He's there, and neither one of those things is very likely.
Sure, but it's been a bunch of stuff. I was having a conversation with somebody the other day, and I even said because I was trying. What was it? Because the question I got asked was, "Are you getting pumped for the new season, or whatever?" And I even said, "I'm trying to get there." I had said last show we did, I'm going to try to ramp up the content after Labor Day. And I didn't really do much this past week either, because just some busy things going on, things like that. And camp hasn't started yet. And I'm going to really have to kick it into gear this week, because now rookie camp's going to be
Rookie
upon
camp
us,
does start
etc.
this week, yeah.
And I even said the reason for that though is I even said I wanted to get back into the swing of writing more, like during the course of last weekend and all of that type of stuff. And I really didn't have the energy. There's a lot of stuff out there right now that is making, I don't want to be on social media a whole lot because it's a lot of, and I even said it's, well, because it's everything. It's like, I'll throw a quick mention of this in here because you even texted me about it. So I'll throw a quick mention of it in here because it was, did you see the thing about Carter Hart's Instagram going private on Thursday night with, the possibility of, here comes that Friday news drop or something like that. And nothing came of it anyway at that given moment. And the thing is that, again, it's just, I know people, I'm in that situation. I know people want answers and it's way long past due. I agree with all of those things, but you're not going to manifest it by putting out there, look what happened, look what happened, look what happened. They're either going to put it out or they're not. And clearly right now they're not interested in putting it out because they're trying. They actually made it pretty clear, as far as I'm concerned, by the way, with this whole thing, that it had to do with, there's no formal report yet done by the London Police Department.
Right. And
until that's done, I think they want to get all three things together and say, here's the Hockey Canada report, the NHL report, and the London Police report, and we can connect the dots on all of them or whatever. And it's not like, listen, if that, like, I'm not, who am I to judge? If that's what makes you happy, then go ahead and it's what makes you happy. I'm not spending a bunch of my hard-earned energy and time.
And we're not going to spend a ton of time on the show.
That I could be using in a better, time that I could be using in a better way, whether it's around the house, whether it's with family and friends, whatever case may be, sitting here trying to figure out the answers to these questions without having complete 1,000% certainty on things. Right. And that goes for two very specific areas right now that there aren't going to be a lot of answers because you have to be careful with how you do that information.
And there's situations we have no control over, and we won't have answers until the people who have the answers give them to us.
Sure, exactly. And I mean, I understand the frustration, and I understand wanting to know, and I understand, kind of to an extent, I understand how it's a bit of it's a slow period. There's nothing happening yet. I hope that when the rookie camp begins and there's actual on the ice activity.
But obsessing over every little micro clue isn't going to make it happen faster.
It's just, I don't, like, to me, I think that's, it's just not, I don't agree with that as the way that I would spend my time, because to me, I know how I would react to it, and it would drive me insane. And it has driven me insane in different aspects. So I stay the hell away from it because I don't want to spend all my time like that.
I don't even think we should spend any more time on it here. I
agree with that.
I think we should head to our wrap. Yeah, I think we should head to our wrap.
Let's finish the show with this, because this is our wrap. Sure. This is our wrap point, because this is exactly what I'm talking about. Get to a point where there's actually something that we can talk about that's not, that isn't feeling as, again, I'm not trying to say as forced. It's just,
but
they need something on the ice.
But we actually have something to talk about, right? We have rookies taking the ice this week for camp. We have some rookie games next weekend. Mm-hmm. We're working our way, right? Yeah. That's 2 weeks away from the preseason schedule.
And that's just it with the other point too, by the way, is that the reason that everybody focuses in on, Michkov didn't play today or whatever it is because that's it's one of the only leagues that is playing.
Right.
Like, you kind of need the preseason or camps to be going and some stuff to be happening elsewhere. Like I saw the other day, speaking of rookie camp, this is a good segue for it. The London Knights just played one of their first preseason games.
Yeah.
So I think Oliver Bonk had an assist and Denver Barkey had a goal. And eventually, it's assumed, both of them, that they will be part of this.
They are going to make the main roster. Oh, this rookie camp. Yes.
That they'll be part of the rookie camp and start, kind of be on leave from London for a little bit while they go through this process, because Bonk's going to be there for sure because he signed.
Right. So
he'll be there.
Absolutely.
It's just then they'll loan him back and that'll be the end of that. Like, it is what it is. But
I could still see him getting a game or two. If I can't.
What I really can't wait for, especially in this first week like this, is when they play because they're doing the same thing. I think it's the same thing they did last year. It's 2 games against the Rangers rookies in Allentown. And that should be really cool. Like, it's just going to be really cool to be able to see, especially what kind of group they throw out there, because I'm curious if they kind of follow the same path with the development camp that they did, where they still left a few guys on, who kind of don't really fit the bill of rookie camp anymore, but they'll be there. Like Forrester will be there, right? Like,
my favorite is the fact that in all these rookie games, there's usually good for a scrap or two from some rookie trying to make a name for himself.
Ooh, yeah, that's a good point.
There's usually a big old ugly dude floating around ready to throw some blows.
It's one of these defensemen that they just picked up like late in the draft this year, who's tall and like will throw some with them, or something like that. They didn't really, or better yet, well, did Desnoyers go through the development camp? I thought he did, didn't he?
I think he did, yeah.
So maybe it's him. Desnoyers been known to scrap a couple times.
Yeah, so
he's a scrappy guy,
yeah, absolutely. And so we got good news, bad news, Kevin. Which do you want first here?
Oh, good news, bad news. I mean, I always prefer to start with the bad news.
Bad news, okay.
Because then you finish on the good news.
Right. So the bad news is that we do have 2 weeks before our next show.
Oh well,
we are still taking 1 week off next week. Yeah. We will be back in 2 weeks, the day before the first mainline preseason game against the New Jersey Devils. We will be back in 2 weeks to talk about this rookie camp, talk about these rookie games, give a little preview on how camp has gone, talk about the preseason games upcoming.
Talk about what I saw at training camp too, because I will be there for the first handful of days, so I'll have some in-person stuff to talk about.
And the good news on the back half of that bad news is that this is our last 2 week break of the summer. This is our last summer show officially. The hockey starts soon with rookie camp this week. Games coming up. We talked about that. The next show is our official kind of start of the season. We're going to have a little bit of a preseason talk. The show after that might be a season preview, honestly. Maybe the week after, maybe 2 weeks.
Yeah, I'm trying to think, because what we're going to get to is we're going to get to a show that's right before the preseason starts, so it's early training camp, and we can kind of highlight rookie camp. We're going to then be able to do a show the week after that would be 4 preseason games in, I believe. So you got a lot of material to work with there.
Maybe even more with some split squad stuff going on.
Well, they don't have any split squad on the actual preseason schedule.
Oh, okay.
Now I don't know the schedule yet for the actual camp, and because one thing I will tell, I think you may remember this from last year. A lot of John Tortorella's training camps involve a lot of scrimmage play.
Yes.
So there certainly will be opportunities for some of that in the middle of it. So there's always going to be something like that. But 4 preseason games is about it. I mean, like 4 games in a week is about as good as like the busiest week we usually have, right? Like, so that's good. And then I think the week after is our season preview show.
Yeah, I was about to say. So mark your calendars if you're watching. Make sure to hit the subscribe button.
October 8th, by the way.
Hit the notification bell if you're on YouTube too. Get notified every time an episode goes up. October 8th will be our season preview, but we will be back in 2 weeks on September 24th with our next show. And we'll have some hockey to talk about. In the meantime, follow Kevin pretty much everywhere at Kevin_Durso. Follow the show at YWT Podcast. Find us everywhere you find your podcasts, including sportstalkphilly.com. And until then, I mean, we got 2 weeks, one last summer break, and then we're back to weekly shows, baby. All right. We'll see ya.